Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, today we're going to be talking about best offensive champions for current victory track meta, which is basically a meta with no real nodes. Right, and there's also an important distinction to make here. There are champions that are amazing dual-purpose champions that I am not including in this list, even though they are obviously extremely offensively capable. I will make that video tomorrow, all things going smooth. Champions such as Galen. Galen can finish fights very quickly, and he's a very troublesome defender. Or we can take a look at a champion like Domino, which serves a perfect balanced purpose on being a very good defender, but we need her to be. She can also finish out fights quite quickly. In today's list, we're going to be looking at basically the best of the best champions to be used defensively. The ones that finish fights the fastest, so-called battlegrounds nukes for this victory track meta. Also, as I'm starting to discuss them, it is very important that you guys understand that you do not have to fill your deck with all of these, or even most of these. In fact, if I take a look at my victory track deck, I only have around 4 or 5 champions that are basically straight up offensive beasts. Okay, so there's 3, 4, I think I run about, 4 of them, 5 of them. Because I do believe that vast majority of the deck should be champions ideally with dual purpose, because that lets you have much more maneuverability in the battlegrounds, or straight up defenders. So if I would have to kind of split it into a balance, 5 flat out defenders, 5 flat out attackers, and ideally 20 champions that can shift in between defense and offense is more or less how I try to build my decks when it comes down to it. Because it's very, very tempting to fill your deck with the fastest destroyers of the opponents and then realize that you have nothing to place on defense and you have to place somebody like Hitmonkey on defense and the opponent just rolls through them even quicker. So let's start with obvious ones. The first one is Human Torch. Yes, you can win matches with Human Torch in defense as well at times when you kind of trap your opponent. But ultimately, there is a very good reason why Human Torch is one of the most banned champions in Alliance War and in Battlegrounds, and in situations such as this, where there is, well, basically no real nodes holding him back. It's quite obvious that he's going to be an absolute monster. He is still an absolute monster in a meta right now in the Gladiator circuit, where he basically can only hit opponent while they are stunned, but he's still finishing fights extremely quickly. And that just shows how powerful he is. Then moving on to skill class. And skill class is arguably the biggest nuke class as far as Battlegrounds are concerned. And we're going to start off with Black Cat. And Black Cat is very dangerous because she's a nuke for a ton of hard matchups. She's a nuke that a lot of other champions on this list can't necessarily deal with excellently well. For instance, Hulklings, or she does Nick Furies extremely fast, and so on and so forth, because of her kind of like unique abilities. I very recently made a Black Cat guide. If you're interested in learning more, definitely check that out. Then obviously we have Hitmonkey, a monkey that has leapfrogged to prominence due to Battlegrounds because of his guaranteed crits, his access to bleed, disorient, versatility, ability to shrug off debuffs. Excellent champion if you run Recall Tree, and still great without it. So definitely Hitmonkey is an absolute menace in Battlegrounds. Quite often I actually end up banning this guy just because he kind of intervenes too much with champions that like plays on defense. And another champion that has jumped up in popularity is definitely Stealth Suit Spider-Man. Another good reason for that is the fact that he does in fact has access to his slow, because we can use pre-fights in Battlegrounds. And in many of the matchups, when you can take away opponents unstoppable with his huge crit rating and then with his fury, he obviously will perform exceedingly well. Again, a champion that can in fact take a lot of trickier, let's say, mystic champions. Even Dr. Doom is doable with him. And that is something very, very valuable for a Battlegrounds nuke. So if you do have a Stealth Suit Spidey and you're considering whether he's good or not, as a nuke option in Battlegrounds, he definitely is. Now we have Shang-Chi, again a champion that might not necessarily be the fastest. There are champions that can finish fights quicker, and that's one misconception that people have with Shang-Chi, that he's always going to be this like extremely speedy champion. The reality is that there are faster champions. Shang-Chi's damage output is about average, but that is just about it. If somebody is going to show Shang-Chi dropping multi-hundred thousand special 2, well, it takes a lot of time to build it up, and in Battlegrounds it's kind of like clearly on display that you don't really have the luxury to do that. He is still fast though, but most uniquely he's also extremely reliable, and he can get his own openings in many different ways with his unblockables, with his stuns through block, and obviously however else he would. And then obviously he has the advantage of accessing slow and powerful purify abilities, so he's definitely an offensive menace, especially if you do see somebody running a rank 4 Shang-Chi. That again is a very strong candidate for a ban in my opinion. Now another champion that is kind of shooting to prominence, honestly, a champion that has been in contest for a long time, kind of not here nor there. I have always personally expressed my fancy for the champion. I always thought he's underrated and quite cool, and now the most skilled Battlegrounds players who definitely brought this to forefront. And an additional thing that is amazing about Massacre is that he has very few bad matchups and matchups that he can't do, because he doesn't rely on anything in particular in order to be able to do the damage. Obviously, there are some champions that he can't do, but the cool thing is that obviously he can dish out a lot of incinerate damage, but if opponents incinerate, they take a burst of damage instead, and that doesn't stop him from dropping a massive level 2 in opponent's block and nuking them down anyways. And then obviously access to the disorient and bleed can also be handy in a ton of different matchups. So Massacre is definitely somebody that you should be watching out for, especially if you play some certain individuals. But in most cases, if you see Massacre in opponent's deck, then you should know something's up. And obviously we have Archangel here. Just a reminder, this list isn't in any specific order. Archangel is one of those champions where if he works, he destroys. If he doesn't work, well, then he really doesn't work. And unfortunately, he also doesn't really have any defensive purpose, hence he's on this list. But just drafting Archangel often severely limits opponents' possibilities of defensive kind of draft. So for a while, I thought that drafting Archangel as like your first pick is maybe not necessarily the best thing to do, because opponent could just, Archangel trap you and make sure that every single champion that I place on defense is either bleed or poison immune. But then I quite soon realized, just by the virtue of having Archangel, you kind of can force opponent in a fairly shitty draft, and even if they make your Archangel useless, quite often it's kind of like good enough for you to have, stop them from picking some of the most nastiest champions to go up against. Then we have Omega Red. With Omega Red, there is a massive caveat. I do not recommend like low sig rank 3 Omega Reds or anything like that. Typically, Omega Red is that champion. Even I, in most cases, unless I'm running Recall Tree, don't run my rank 3 Sig 180 Omega Red. But if you do see a rank 4 Omega Red, then again, that is a very potential ban option, because rank 4 Sig 200 Omega Red is capable of taking some of the nastiest fights in extremely quick amount of time. So it is a champion to be wary of. Then we obviously have Ghost. Ghost is always dangerous in virtually every meta. Apparently Ghost even kind of works in this auto block meta, but I don't know. And Starking and Spider-Man is, again, one of those champions that Battlegrounds has completely revitalized. And the truth is, Starky is pretty much one of those champions that's amazing in attack in vast majority of the metas. I think, aside from Safeguard meta, he has pretty much worked in all of them, because of his access to taunt, because of his access to power control, and obviously insanely huge DPS once you actually get your charges up. So, Starking and Spider-Man is definitely extremely good addition for your nuke potential. Then we have CGR, and CGR obviously is one of the highest DPS output champions, if not the highest DPS output champion in kind of like short to medium level fights. Well, most specifically in like medium level fights, medium length duration fights, which kind of happens to be Battlegrounds. So Again, CGR is, whenever he can work in a meta, he unfortunately doesn't really work in the current meta in Gladiator Circuit, but on the victory track, he definitely is an absolute torpedo. And then we have some Mystic champions. Diablo, I added in Diablo here because he's a Mystic champion that is always giving me a ton of problems, because he's a Mystic champion that obviously works largely through poison, and is also somehow able to do many of the fights where majority of the Mystic champions don't really do too well, and that's namely in matchups where there aren't too many buffs. So Diablo is a very worthwhile offensive investment, in my opinion, for Battlegrounds. And here we have Juggernaut. Now, this might be the most surprising addition to many of you, but honestly, Juggernaut now is a machine for Battlegrounds. Obviously not every matchups, but a ton of troublesome matchups. He can just run through them in sub 30 seconds. That level 2 dishes out a massive amount of damage, plus he has his increased combat power rate, therefore he gets to his level 2 faster than most champions would. He also can find easy openings without a need to parry, just by holding block and utilizing his unstoppable. Obviously, just like Archangel, just like plenty of other champions, there are matchups where you will not want to use Juggernaut. But, again, when he works, he does work extremely well, to a point where it's quite ridiculous. I am planning in near future to hopefully piece together a little Juggernaut showcase for you guys to kind of convince you about that. And then the last one is Longshot. Longshot could actually be added as a dual threat, because Longshot is a pain to fight in most of the instances, but Longshot definitely is one of the most effective Mystic nukes. So these are overall the best champions to use in your deck whilst you're on victory track. When you reach Gladiator Circuit, then the meta shifts. Obviously, then there are different lists. But as an example, I also wanted to show my deck that I use for... I didn't add Tigra. Jesus Christ. How could I forget that? Tigra is arguably the most dangerous offensive purpose champion. Where's Tigra? There you go. There you go, baby Tigra. Solely offensive purpose, an absolute nuke. Right, so I'm going to show my Battlegrounds deck for base victory track meta for friendlies and stuff like that. And you guys are going to see that I'm not running many of these champions. I am running some. That's why it's always very important to pick and choose. And as I explained before, the reason for that is fairly straightforward, because I want majority of my champions to serve dual purpose. Should have added Silver Surfer to this list, actually. Anyways, as you can see, I'm running Human Torch, I'm running Archangel, I'm running Tigra, I'm running CGR from this list, and that's kind of pretty much it. And then you guys are going to go through my roster, and you guys are going to realize that vast majority of, and Silver Surfer should be on this list that I didn't add, my bad. How kind of dual purpose, where Dr. Doom is not the fastest nuke, but he's troublesome to go up against. In defense, obviously we have Hercules, who is again he's quite fast, but he also can be very annoying defenders. And we have Meg Sentinel. Guardian is an excellent example of a duo champion. Gore actually works as a duo champion as well, where you can use him offensively and defensively, similarly to Nimrod. Then we have champions that are primarily defensive, like Mephisto and so many more. But yeah, vast majority of the champions that I run in my victory track deck are tuned to be able to at least delay opponents on defense, or require specific counters, or also be able to function as offensive champions. Right, all that being said, let me know what you guys think about these champions and this list, and I will catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about